welcome to lunchtime Vinyasa. A little 30-minute break in your day so that we can kind of stretch out and move a little bit. So we're going to start in child's pose. I'm going to position my mic up here on the edge of the mat. Hopefully it will pick me up, and then when we get to things that are a little less mobile, I'll put it back on. Okay, so you can have your knees in tighter for your child's pose, or you can take them out a little wider. You can touch the big toes together, leave a little bit of space. If your chest or your forehead will touch the floor, you can start with that. If that's a little far away, you can take your crossed arms and put them underneath your forehead. If this pose is just not the right pose for you to start with, you can start with anything. We'll all come together eventually. What I like about child's pose is it gives you an opportunity to sort of, it's almost like a little cave. So I can kind of forget the rest of the world and really tune into the sound and the feeling of my breath. So depending on how busy you've been today, it might be really nice to just take a pause here. If you felt like you've been a little stagnant, you could move this pose a little side to side. And instead of holding it still, you can move with the breath. So 2 more big breaths. And then we're going to add a little twist. So you can come all the way up to the point where the hips are a little forward of the knees or even right over the knees. Or you can keep it a little farther back. Take one arm underneath the opposite armpit. And if you care to, you can wrap the spare arm up over your back. I like to use the spare arm to kind of draw this top shoulder blade towards the center as I pull against the floor on the opposite shoulder blade a little bit. Creates a little more sensation in my upper back, which I appreciate. Now my neck and my head are just relaxed and resting here on the floor. If you feel tension in your neck or something that feels uncomfortable for your neck, adjust. I'm going to take 2 more breaths on this side. Sometimes it feels nice to kind of pull the hip one way or the other, so you can experiment with that as well. And then you're going to push your hand into the floor, lift to remove that arm. Sometimes I do a little movement in that shoulder blade, and then come back to your child's pose or whatever you were doing. Feel the difference between the 2 arms. And then do the opposite side. So one side might be a little different than the other. You might have more room on one side than you have on the other. And so make adjustments. This side gives me a lot more sensation than the other side did, so it's a little more interesting. 2 more breaths here. And then we're going to scoop ourselves out from under there. Give that shoulder a little movement. And one more time, just for a bit, come back to your child's pose. Feel the change, if there is one, in your upper back. I like to try to drop my heart a little closer to the floor. For some people who that's really easy. Another way to get a little bit more of an opening here, if you got 2 blocks, use 2. But you can put your arms up on a block so that as you bring your forehead forward, there's a good deal more stretch up here in this upper back. And so if that seems like a way for you to take a couple more breaths, you can do that. The other option would be to go ahead and float yourself up onto all 4s. And then kind of positioning your hands where it feels appropriate, you can move your spine up and down. So it's possible that that upper back stretch might be better done this way as opposed to with the elbows propped up, but they're both great. So you can certainly do one or the other, or both. I like to, when I do this part of the spine, I like to kind of lean back into it and curl the tailbone under a little bit just to really round it out a bit. So releasing some of the muscle that normally holds that curve, and then allowing myself to take this upper back and let the chest drop through to open up that upper back space. So that's kind of the opportunity to get into that upper back and lower back. Do that 2 more times, whatever it is you're up to. All right. So wherever we've been, we're going to kind of join up together here. So we're going to walk forward into a modified plank so that the hips come forward of the knees. I like to take the feet up sometimes, and sometimes I just leave them down. But this usually is a little less traumatic on my knees. So you're going to shift the weight forward and then elbows in, lower down with control. And then come into your cobra pose and use your back muscles to get yourself there so that you're warming up your back in a little bit. You can certainly use your arms. And then press up. And then go back towards that child's pose. It doesn't have to go all the way back. It can turn into kind of almost a downward dog shape. Puppy dog. Come forward, lower down. Come into your cobra. Oh. Push back up. Just warming everything up. Come on back. Oh. And then one more time coming forward. And we're going to tuck the toes at the end of this one and take ourselves back to down dog. So press up. You can go all the way to a full plank if you like. Make sure your hands are positioned about shoulder distance apart. And then when you get to your down dog, pause for a moment and walk or move the shoulders or swing the hips or just hold it and press down through your heels and up through your hips. Oh. All right, so we're going to take the hands to the feet or the feet to the hands, whichever way your mat is oriented, and it's going to work out better for you. And then once you get here where you're forward bending, release the arms, and you might even give the arms a little shake. Oh. We're going to do some circles for the wrist while we're here. If hanging upside down isn't so great, you can come up a little higher. Oh. Go the other direction with the circles. And then spread the fingers out as you press up and come to the halfway mark. And then as you curl back over, bend your knees, squeeze your hands into fists. Spread the fingers out. Maybe press into the shins or the thighs. Come to that flat back position feeling. And then fold back over. I don't think our back is ever really flat, but you get the idea. Come up, feeling yourself kind of flatten out. And then bend the knees, and we're going to come through a chair all the way up to mountain. And a little extension there, so bring the feet closer together if you like, or bring them, farther apart, depending on how close they were. Give yourself a little side stretch. Now what I'm doing is I'm sending my hip out to the side. If that causes knee trouble, keep the hip more stable and just stretch the side of the waist. So depending on how your body is strung and how tight things are, you might just do just the upper part, or you can add that lower part. Oh, that felt good. All right, let's do the other side. Whoops, maybe without touching your furniture or your plants. So we're gonna send that either the hip out or keep the pelvis stable and just bend the spine. So when I send the hip out, I get a little bit more of this sensation on my outer hip. Oh, all right, coming back. Oh, all right, yogis. Now we're gonna do a little rinse for the neck while we're here. So we're gonna take the chin down, roll the head around. Now if it feels okay to go all the way to the back, fine. Sometimes for me that feels crunchy. So I just go to the back and come around. And go almost to the back, just to the point where that stretches and come around. So it's up to you. And the length of your neck may determine how good that feels. My neck is so short, but my head basically just lands on my upper back. So it's not too bad to make those kinds of circles. Sometimes it feels crunchy in my neck though, so I won't go all the way back. All right, so you're gonna do one more full positioning there. When you get to the center, go ahead and let your head float up. Ooh. And then find your mountain pose. Now, you can do your mountain pose any way you like. Some people do mountain poses with these really dramatically extended arms. The problem I have with that for myself is that when I do that, it automatically thrusts my rib cage forward and emphasizes my lower back curve. I've already got enough stuff going on there. So for me, that's not the appropriate mountain pose. So the appropriate mountain pose for me is to feel slightly softer in the knee and hip, to imagine that my tailbone is a big dinosaur tail or a kangaroo tail, so that instead of that lower back curve getting increased, I'm exaggerating here, but you get the idea. Instead, I'm supporting that lower back curve with some core support. And so just that change. Now, as soon as I flip the arms out, immediately my body wants to go back into that exaggerated lumbar because everything's connected. Now, if that doesn't happen for you, then you do your mountain pose. But again, recognizing, especially if you ever intend to teach yoga at some point in your life, recognizing everybody's body is a little different, and you might want to have different ways of considering these poses. And so rather than forcing everyone to do the same thing, you can find a pose that feels like you're evenly pressing your feet into the ground. There's a sense of buoyancy through the hip and the legs. So we're not locking out any of those joints, and there's a sense of core support and structure so that we feel stable and also nice. Stable, and there's a sense of well-being. All right, if you have the room to sweep your hands out to the side, you can do that. If you're like me and you've got things in your way, you can come straight up the middle, maybe a little baby back bend, a little forward bend, coming up to that halfway so that your back is nice and long. And then we're gonna either step out or step back. In this case, I'm gonna go forward because I'm at the back of my mat and make a downward dog happen. Now, from downward dog, you can either stay there or you can add the vinyasa, coming into a plank and either leaving this plank that way or modifying it and then lowering down, coming into the cobra, or you can press up a little higher into the upward dog or somewhere in between. Press back to your plank, take it back to your dog. I'm going to take my right leg up first, hook that leg up and over, bring it back to the center, hug it in. Hook it up and over. If that doesn't feel good, don't go so far. Hug it in. And then one more time, bring it back. Stretching through the heel, I'm going to level out my pelvis and feel that intense stretch through the leg I'm standing on. And then I'm going to step my leg forward. Now, if you can go straight up the middle, fine. If you can't, go out at a diagonal and then bring your leg in. And that'll give you an opportunity to step forward. Okay, we're coming to Warrior Two. So Warrior Two opens me more towards the front. The foot's a little more turned out. There's still a diagonal to the pelvis. Don't jerk your pelvis around. It'll pull your leg into places you don't need it. Let your pelvis and your legs work with each other. Nice big breath with your arms out. Come on back to reverse warrior. And as you exhale, we're going to come towards a side angle, but keep it light. Coming back to reverse warrior. Ooh, exhale towards that side angle. Oh, good. Now come back. And we're going to take the hands to the ground. Right hand, left hand, step back to dog. And again, you can hold the dog or throw in that vinyasa plank. Lower down, back bend, and then come back. All right, so we're going to take a big breath, lift that left leg up. Again, hook it over the back if you can open up that front part of your hip, and then hug it in, get that little extra core work. Flip it over, hug it in, take it back, and then we're going to level the pelvis and reach into the heel here with the standing leg, because, that stretch feels good. And then bring your leg forward and in. And again, choosing the methodology that's going to work best for you so that you can find this kind of flow. Get the hips where you like them. Put your arms up. Come back to reverse warrior. And then towards that side angle, but light. And then back to reverse. And towards that side angle, but light. And then one more time, coming back to reverse. And then hand to the ground dog. Whew. Now we're all going to come forward into the plank. You want to add a little bit, you can take a leg up off the ground, hold the plank. 3, 2, 1, and then lower and down all the way to the belly. Now we're going to do some locust. You can have the arms back, out to the sides, or up by your ears. I'm going to keep mine to the back. And I may also decide to keep the hand planted just closer to the waist. All right, so we're going to lift the chest off the floor, lift through the legs, and reach back. However high your legs go up without jacking up your low back. Now I'm pressing my palms down and drawing the elbows back because it broadens out my chest and feels really lovely. Big deep breaths when you can. Up into the chest muscles. One more. And then coming on down, we're going to press ourselves back up and take it back to down dog. Now, oh, feel that dog. Does it feel different than the first one? Okay. Right leg goes up. We're going to bring it in and come across towards the elbow. You might touch, you might not. Coming back towards the elbow. Coming back and then pause again. Level the hips, sink into the standing leg. Reach through those toes. And then stepping your foot forward in the way that works best for you. We're going to come back to our friend warrior 2, kinda. So we're going to come up. Find the warrior 2 in the hips. But then we're going to change some rules. So we're going to take the arms into kind of a circular position and then into a circular position. So we're kind of doing those same movements with the spine to a reverse and then to the side angle, but holding myself really firmly through the core. So one more time, a little circle in the front, a little circle in the back. Now straighten out your front leg. And if you want to then extend into that triangle the way you like to, you can. I'm going to come into triangle a little differently. So I'm going to bend my knee. I'm going to draw my back foot in a little because I like a shorter stance here. I'm going to put a block on the floor. If you don't have a block, you don't have to use it. You can use your shin bone. And keeping my knee bent, I'm going to lengthen through my spine first. I'm going to rotate open, press into the block, press into the floor with both legs, extend my legs, and then bend. And if you want to follow me, we're just emerging into this triangle and then coming out. We're going to do it one more time. Emerge into the triangle, lengthen, feel, and then add the upper body so that your triangle becomes your triangle. But it's also one that you've explored and you're shaking up your notions about. And take one more breath. Good. So we're going to come out of the triangle. We're going to go into a balance pose. So we can bring this back foot in slowly. And you can balance with both hands on the floor. And that becomes standing splits, which is a lovely pose. Or providing that you can do this without falling onto your furniture, you can open the hip, lift through your core, stabilize yourself. Stabilize by lifting this upper hip, and maybe the hips stay on top of each other. And if you fall, you should definitely catch with your feet rather than your furniture. All right, put both feet down. And we'll step back into down dog. That was fun. And then also the fun part for me is feeling how one hip really feels different than the other. Oh, it feels so good. All right, so throw that vinyasa in or hold the dog and let your dog go to the disco a little bit. So everybody's joining back up in down dog. And we're going to take that left leg up and bring it across. And take it back. And bring it across and hug that core in. And take it back. And stretch through that standing leg. And then step that guy forward. And again, we're going to come to our warrior 2, but we're going to come in maybe in a way we don't normally come in. Finding some freedom. And then we're making that circle in the front to come into these reverse and side angle shapes. Making the core muscles, all of these great things that hold our hips and our spine together. Do a little work. Okay, so coming back and then coming into your triangle again. You can come into your triangle the way you like, or you can try my little change up on it. I'm going to bring my back leg in. You may not need to do that. Depends on your anatomy. And then keeping this knee bent, I'm going to expand through my torso, lengthen both sides of my waist, straighten the leg, and bend it. Rotate open, straighten the leg, and bend it. Let everything get a little soft. And then one more time, I'm going to go for it. And once I've got everything rotated and my shoulder blades are on my back, then I might extend that arm and look up, or extend that arm and look down. I have scar tissue on this shoulder that makes it a little more challenging for me to turn my head and look up. There's some real tension there. So on this side, I tend to look down. Now my feet are pressing down. I'm lengthening through my spine. All the muscles in the center of my body kicked on. Now, we're going to transform this into that balancing pose. So you might wiggle that foot and you might just jump up there. Maybe it's a standing splits. You want your hands closer to the earth. Maybe you're going to let that hip stack up and open back out into that triangle shape. Lift with this hip. Even if it makes you wobbly, lift. Your hand can get so light. And then when you fall, you catch. Big breath. And bring both hands down and step back into down dog. Okay. So once again, pausing with down dog. I don't know about you guys, but the more I do down dog, the better it feels. It just is so nice. It's a hard pose too. But as my muscles warm up and get used to holding me, it gets better. Draw the shoulder blades and hug the armpits towards each other. Okay, so we're going to come forward into that plank. You might take that other foot up and hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to lower down all the way to the belly. Now, we're going to come into a more static stretch here, which is the Sphinx. So you're going to put your elbows up in front. Now, if you prefer, you can lift up onto straighter arms. Now that puts quite a lot of pressure in my low back. I don't have a lot of flexibility in my spine. So for me, this is enough. As soon as I come up onto straighter arms, I feel my pelvis start to lift off the floor. That means this part of my low back is done. But you'll feel it for yourself. Now, stretch one leg back and then the other, trying to lengthen at the front of the hip. Reach through your legs and press the tops of your feet into the floor. And you're going to use your glutes. Rather than try to squeeze the glutes towards each other, we're going to imagine instead that we're trying to touch the heels with the glutes. We're going to try to fire up this lower part of the glute that comes out towards this IT band. So we're firing the glute to draw the leg towards the floor. Okay, I'm lengthening a little bit. Oh, that feels nice. And the feet are reaching back and I'm trying to rotate so that the top of my thigh is really pressing down into the floor rather than a little bit of my inner thigh or a little bit of my outer thigh. So kind of feeling that for yourself. I find it sometimes fun to spread my toes apart and then come back, pressing the top of my foot together without squeezing my toes too hard. So we're activating the glutes and activating this legs to help support this back bend. I'm going to take 2 more breaths. All right, okay, so we're going to let ourselves come down. Give yourself a little windshield wiper wobble. And then we're going to roll onto the right side. Okay. So I'm going to stack my hips on top of my hips, and I'm going to stack my shoulders on top of my shoulders. And mostly I'm going to try to hold that. I'm going to take this top leg up front, and you can put it straight out, or you can bend this knee and put the foot on the ground. And then I'm going to press, so I'm going to press my hand into this part of my hip, right there where the pocket goes. I'm just going to stretch that part out. Oh, this is going to turn into another pose in just a moment. We're doing it one piece at a time. So I'm trying to create some length along this side, okay? So if that is easier to achieve with the foot on the floor and you can feel yourself really draw this hip down away from the rib cage, do that. Okay, one more breath here. Just trying to create that length. You can even do it with your hand. All right, so we're going to try to memorize that sensation because we're going to come into a pose on our back. So flipping yourself onto your back, that leg is still going to be across. I'm just going to now meet it with the other leg, okay? Now, if you can stack your knees on top of each other, you do it that way. If that doesn't work, make more of a figure 4, so there's a space in between, okay? Either way will work, and you can hold on to one ankle or both. Now, I'm going to try to create that same length right there while I'm holding this shape. So I get into the shape, and then I try to move the pelvis, move the ribs, so that I'm feeling myself actively lengthening that side. And you can turn the head towards the bottom side leg, the left or the right, whichever one you went for. And just creating length along your side while you're simultaneously really stretching out this kind of outer hip area. Oh, doesn't that feel nice? I love this. Okay, if your head is turned, bring it back to the center. We're going to take one more breath here. Then we're going to let go. And releasing the legs, you can give them a little shake straight up. Or put them on the ground. I like to do both and do these little windshield wiper moves. So I'm once again targeting the same area, but I'm doing it now with movement. So this little muscle right here is responsible for turning the leg in and stretching this part out. As soon as I go the other way, same, I'm stretching out this part and working on this part, okay? So, similar idea. But we're going to do the other side. So, we're going to roll onto the left, and I'm going to spin around 180 degrees so it's easier to see what I'm doing, because we have some limitations with our video situation. Okay. So again, once you're laying on your side, you're going to get your hips and your shoulders stacked, and that top leg is going to come over the top, and it can be straight out or you can bend it. This is a variation of what's called the sleeping Buddha, and we're using it just to create or feel this activation of muscle that lives between the top rim of the pelvis and the ribs, okay? So around the sides, that's my obliques, and deeper, my transverse abdominis, and on the back, that's my quadratus lumborum muscles, for those of you that are interested in that kind of science. I'm stretching out to some degree these little side glutes, glute medius, and its friends. And so we're feeling that length, and we're going to try to recreate the length here when we flip this over. So take one more breath, try to memorize that sensation of drawing these 2 points away from each other. And then we'll roll this thing over and bring that bottom leg in, and maybe holding the ankles, maybe not, maybe just holding one leg. Then recreate that length. There's a tendency for everything to gather here. So we're trying to create that space once we've got hold of everything. So there's some resistance, and I'm working with that resistance to stretch. And oh gosh, I don't know about you guys, but definitely sometimes, especially on one side, I really feel that stretch on the outer part of my hip. It's so nice. And again, you can turn your head the opposite direction. I usually go with whatever leg is on the bottom, so that I'm stretching myself almost from my ear to my hip along this side now. Nice big breaths when you're not talking. I'll do about 3 more. And then when you come back to the center with your head, and then you can let go of your legs. And if you're like me, it feels good to give them a little shake. It's actually a really old practice, shaking the body. And it dates, or travels back all the way to China, Tibet, and Taiwan, as well as, because everybody borrowed from everybody, some parts of northern India as well. So we're going to do these little windshield wipers just to kind of stretch and open this little area right here, upper hip, and right there in the front pocket, just to release that tension we just created. All right, yogis, here's where you have to make a decision. Are you going to get yourself something to eat? Do you have a couple of moments to stretch out on your back and just relax in Shavasana? Or is this the perfect opportunity for you to spend a couple of minutes doing a meditation where you're seated, they all feel good to me. So I'm going to leave you to go to your lunch, or if you were just getting a little break in the middle of your morning, wherever you're doing this. Thank you so much for joining me. Namaste.